Now, when it comes to processing the basses, and this is going to be like kind of a general theme in every song that I master, I'm going to be mainly looking for, well, 3 or maybe 4 things. One is whether I can like give a little bit more definition to a bass, meaning in most cases, in most songs, most people, like just generally speaking, are kind of like overlook the definition of a bass. And by definition, I mean the higher end ranges, the overtones. Sometimes there's a little bit of a shine is not gonna like hurt a bass line, and it can help a little bit with more understandability. So it's not going to come through as a rumbling bass, but it's instead it's going to feel like something that's a little bit more like shining. Might be a little bit too extreme to say it like this, but there's going to be a little bit more of a silky coating on top of it. Now, in certain cases, this is just absolutely not going to work. But this is one thing that before I even do anything, this is already something that's just by experience and just by trial and error and repetition. I already know that this is something that I want to check whether this works, because I would say at least 60% of the time, this is going to be like a very meaningful help with the sonics of any song. And another thing that I'm going to be checking is the actual low-end content of the bass, because in many cases there's going to be some rumbling, possibly in between like 100 and 200 hertz range, like maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower sometimes. Really just depends on in which range the bass is actually playing in. And another thing that I want to kind of take care of is like, even if I just look at the waveform without listening to anything, I can already see that there are like these high peaks, and so these are probably multiple sounds on one stem, on one bass group stem. And so to these peaks, I potentially want to try to like tame at least to some degree, because this just comes with experience, that I already know that these sort of peaks would be tamed by the output limiter anyway. So it's much better to try to solve these types of things on the individual stem level whenever this is possible, because otherwise, like these peaks, so how the output limiter would deal with these peaks might be different than how an individual processing would be able to deal with these things. Because, for example, this peak might affect like what happens here on this channel later on. If there's also a peak here and a peak on this channel, the output limiter will react to both at the same time. And I also, if I have output compression, I also don't necessarily want the output compression to be triggered by these peaks later on. So these are essentially like precautionary measures that I want to take. And so yeah, these are the main things that I'm going to be looking for. And sometimes I'm also going to be checking for whether it makes sense to tweak something about the stereo field of any given bass, because this is also like kind of a common, well, not necessarily issue, but in certain cases, a little bit of a mono-compatible widening would like benefit a bassline tremendously. For example, if it's like entirely in mono, like just a little bit of side information could like really make the song just breathe easier, in certain cases. Now, this is not a one size fits all. Like everything I'm talking about is like gonna be true 60 to 70% of the time, and in certain cases it's going to be like entirely different approach, but these are the general things that are going through my mind whenever I'm starting to just go through a baseline and check for technical improvement possibilities. And so this is exactly what I'm doing now. What I talked about, the dynamic control, these peaks are a little bit like just unnecessarily pokey, and we can kind of tame them without any sonical loss, really. Now, when it comes to synths, again, it's a general thing that once again is going to be kind of true, that in most cases the mid-range is going to be a little bit too much, and the higher end overtones are going to be a little bit too little. Yeah, so this is what's exactly happening right now with the screen. It's like I'm looking to see whether like boosting a little bit of the high end is beneficial or not. And yeah, in most cases, this is how it's gonna look like, and this is what it's also very important to not just do this, like, so whenever I do something like this, to not just do this in the busiest parts of the song, but also to check back on the earlier parts, like the breakdowns, where maybe this synth stem is the only thing that's playing, and maybe in the context of all the other instruments, a little bit more sonics, more sonic enhancement in the high end is sounding amazing, and it's really just giving a new dimension to a song. But maybe in the breakdown, this completely wrecks the balance. imbalance. And so maybe it might make sense to like separate the stem into two parts and have one where you don't have this sort of enhancement and only have it in a chorus part of a song, or like maybe even the reverse where, you know, this thing would help in the breakdown but not in the chorus parts, etc., etc. You get the point. But the main idea here is that I want to make sure that there's no the mid range is not too, like, I don't hear this constant type of mid range, but instead I hear a little bit less of it. I let the bass breathe as much as this is possible, and I give a little bit more depth to the high end, essentially. And in certain cases, I'm also going to do this with a stereo and enhancement, pretty much the same way, where I'm gonna be checking whether it makes sense to like get the middle parts a little bit narrower and the higher parts a little bit more wider. Sometimes certain stems come to me with white noise already printed on them. These might come from an emulation type of virtual instrument, or maybe like even from a live recording. This might happen sometimes. Even if this type of procedure would sound great contextually to enhance the high end, if this is like too much, so I'm bringing up the noise floor way too much, that's already printed on the stem, I'm going to be like dialing back from that, you know, up until the point where, you know, I still get the benefit of the enhancements, but I'm not, you know, like bringing up unnecessary noise. Now, when it comes to these Atmos sort of channels, so whenever I just see the name, I'm already kind of gonna assume that this stem is like a little bit too wide, because just how like whenever a stem is like labeled Atmos in a sample pack, I'm like at least 50% of the time it's going to be like out of phase already. So I'm just gonna like in most cases check whether, you know, some stereo adjustments make sense here or not. Possibly I'm gonna check for some like noise floor adjustments if I hear something when I listen to it individually. But yeah, here I think I'm not gonna do anything extreme or like anything, because nothing else is like really necessary. It was a little bit too wide, but nothing too extreme. So my adjustments are also not gonna be too extreme either. Now, when it comes to sources, like when it comes to stems that, for example, such as this electric guitar stem in our case, where even just visually, like even without listening to anything, you can already kind of see that there's a stereo imbalance here. Like these parts are a little bit too much on the right, and these parts are not enough on the left. So something will probably need to be done to be able to account for this, because listening on speakers, this might not even be all that big of a tragedy, but for people listening to this song on headphones, this might like just stick out a little bit too much. So yeah, whenever this is possible, I'm gonna like try to account for these like a little bit too extreme stereo imbalances and try to balance it out in some sort of way. And sometimes this can be done just easily by using like this like any sort of like plugin that I can make the whole signal a little bit narrower. But in other cases where this would be either too destructive or it wouldn't be just wouldn't be convenient to do so, I'm gonna like load up a compressor. In this case, I've used the DC Alpha Master emulation, and this unit is great because you can very clearly see visually how much the reduction is, and you can set up the thresholds and the ratios according to them. You can just unlink the channels, set it to left, right, and basically the compressor is gonna do the work just by itself. Like it's going to make sure that there's never gonna be like an imbalanced overflow of whether either the right signal or either the left signal. And yeah, this is what I'm doing here. And yeah, you can very clearly see on how red things are, that it's taking away this much here, it's taking away this much here. So whenever these imbalances are happening, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And obviously there might be some fine-tuning needed, and yeah, this is what I did exactly. And obviously if something so I'm going to just repeat myself here, because I'm going to do the same procedure. It's like I'm going to check whether a little bit more high-end enhancement and a little bit like more like mid-range or low-end reduction like kind of works, whether this makes things better. At a certain point, obviously, I want to also like make sure that I'm not removing too much from the mid-range. So in most cases, what's going to happen is even if I like push the high end up a little bit, I'm not going to touch the mid-range anymore. So if I feel that this is, you know, the balance is right, and there's not that much, you know, masking or something like really technically problematic going on, then I'm gonna like, again, just step out of the way. understand that this is a mastering project. I'm not gonna like try to reinvent the wheel, and just gonna do what's like really truly technically necessary. And here on the path stem, I probably will do the same thing. And what I explained in the previous case, like, so here, for example, I didn't really see the need, like even if I just look at the waveform, but it was also audible that there's no such like great imbalances between the left and the right signal. It's just, it's a little bit like too wide in general. So in cases like this, it's just a simple one-up solution to the problem, a little bit like a narrowing, and once again, a little bit, high-end enhancement possibly, and a little bit like mid-range reduction, and just shaping this sort of balance. Obviously this can be very easily overdone too, but up until a certain point, high-end enhancement and mid-range reductions will mostly sound good to the human ear. Now this plug was bent completely to the left side, so I moved it into the middle, and what I try to do in these cases instead is to make sure that it moves from left to right. And there are many plugins that can do this, like my plugin of choice in this case is Pancake, but so because this is a free one, but there are also like paid alternatives which have more features, but like really this is not really rocket science or anything. It's just a very easy automation tool essentially that makes sure that this plug is that goes from left to right, from left to right, from left to right, and this makes sure that the sample, while still being penned, it's also kind of like symmetrical in a sense. And sometimes symmetry is not something that you want to necessarily do, but in this case I want to account for headphones listening, where it's not entirely pleasant to hear something directly, essentially only from the left side. That's just a little bit too harsh on headphones. And instead of this, like even if this was not the case, I would still kind of just because of my experience with how this works, I would much prefer to have like a balanced soundscape. So for example, if I see that this is entirely on the left side and there's no counterbalance against this on the right side, then I'm gonna be like kind of hesitant to like just to leave something on the left side while there's no counterbalance on the right side, if this makes sense. So yeah, this is basically why I decided to like move the sample instead into the middle and make it move left right, and this is probably going to be a better solution in most cases. And yeah, it's time to introduce all the other stems, channels, and we are very close to getting things right. Now when it comes to these like one stem percussion exports, two things that I generally speaking will look out for. One is that usually the hi-hat range is going to be correct. By correct, I mean that's the one that I'm going to be balancing or like checking everything else against. So basically with the hi-hats, I trust the artists. However, on the extreme high-end part, so above like let's say 15K or so, I might want to check whether I can like enhance the curves a little bit more, and below the hi-hat range, so just below, so it's going to be between the overtone range of the clap sample or like any other like percussive element, and between where the hi-hat would be most prominent. I just want to make sure that there's no gap in between those parts. And if maybe the clap needs a little bit more taming or sometimes needs some enhancement. So here, just as I'm looking at the waveform, I can already see that this is amazing. Like, so this is going to be the hi-hat range. This is going to probably, so this is the part where I'm going to be referencing everything else against. But here, we could do a little bit of a boost here. We could probably equalize this a little bit out here and see whether the clap needs anything. Now, this is something that I don't really do very often, but when I do this is, I mean, it's not that I don't do this very often, but I don't have to do this very often. But sometimes I feel that there are things that are kind of like outside of any regular plugins control. And this is when the Colphos comes in to the rescue. So what this plugin does is essentially it listens to the audio at the same rate, how you have the sample rate set, and it makes the adjustments in for every single sample, if this makes sense. And you will be able to see this on the screen what's happening. So basically my thinking as I was adjusting the EQ, it was that the clap, if I try to remove too much from the clap, at like if I do this as as a permanent like EQ knob or a permanent EQ tweak to reduce from the clap, that takes away from the rest of the sonics a little bit too much. And if I try to brighten up the other ranges, that might be like too much for the clap. And so to be able to solve this issue, I'm gonna try to select the appropriate ranges, and I'm gonna just use Gullfoss to dial in the right amount, because this will make sure that it only reacts when the clap, for example, is too blunt. Is going to be the only parts where it's going to brighten it up, and it's only going to be blunten things when other things are too bright, if this makes sense. So this is essentially like a very sophisticated balancing plugin, which is always referencing against how the human ear is shaped in terms of like listening to audio, what sounds, you know, like a perfect balance on paper for your ears. So as far as I know, this is not really just a static white noise or a pink noise or I don't know, but this is really like a psychoacoustic procedure here.